Deployment of UPDF in South Sudan. General Muhoozi'S Deployment.
The deployment of the UPDF to the Republic of South Sudan is done in conformity to the provision of Article 210D of our Constitution and Section 39 of the UPDF Act. For clarity, I may read both. Article 210, the aid notice Parliament to regulate the Uganda People's Defense Forces. D is the deployment of troops outside Uganda. That is the only provision under the Constitution, because Article 210, when you read it in totality, and if you want me to read, I can read the whole of it. Article 210, Parliament to regulate the Uganda People's Defense Forces. Parliament shall make laws regulating the Uganda People's Defense Forces and in particular providing for A, the organs and structures of Uganda People's Defense Forces. Note this. B, recruitment, appointment, promotion, discipline, and removal of members of the Uganda People's Defense Forces and ensuring the members of the Uganda People's Defense Forces are recruited from every district of Uganda. Note this. C, terms and conditions of service of members of the Uganda People's Defense Forces. D, the deployment of troops outside Uganda. That is why I stated that the deployment is done in conformity with Article 210D of our Constitution. So that means under the Constitution, Parliament has the mandate of making laws to regulate, among others, the deployment of the UPDF or our troops outside Uganda. Now, when you go to the Uganda People's Defense Forces, the law envisaged under Article 210 is now the Uganda People's Defense Forces. This now provides for some bit of details. When you go to Section 39, deployment of troops outside Uganda, and I wish to read the entire Section 39. 39.1. The President may deploy troops outside Uganda for purposes of A, peacekeeping, B, peace enforcement. 2, so it is now settled in the law that under the UPDF Act, the President has the discretionary powers to deploy our troops on two fronts. One is for peacekeeping, two is peace enforcement. Section 39.2 says, deployment of troops for purposes of peacekeeping shall be done with the approval of Parliament. In our resolution, it is crystal clear that the deployment is not for peacekeeping. The deployment is peace enforcement. 3, where the President deploys troops under this section, when Parliament is on recess, the Speaker shall immediately summon Parliament to an emergency session to sit within 21 days after the deployment for purposes of ratifying that deployment. The clarity in the law is, for purposes of peacekeeping, you need prior approval of Parliament. But for purposes of peace enforcement, which is the case of our recent deployment to South Sudan, you do not require prior. You can deploy and come for parliamentary approval retrospectively. I think in the framers of, in the minds of the framers of the law, they are looking at peace enforcement as a response to a kind of an emergency where you do not need to again wait in order for you to deploy. So our deployment is peace enforcement and not peacekeeping. Peacekeeping requires prior approval under the law. Peace enforcement does not. So that is the distinction. And the deployment is peace enforcement. Enforcement is a kind of response to an emergency. There was already a conflict that had broken out in our sister country. It's like you have a neighbor, you are seeing fire already burning in your neighbor's house, and you are not concerned at all. You can't even stand to ask what is happening. So that is the arrangement. And I think the law is very, very clear. We must distinguish between peacekeeping and peace enforcement and what the law says on each. On the question of Kawempe, I wish to defer this to a press conference that will be held tomorrow by the NRM Secretariat in order to give you the true picture of what transpired both in the NRM Central Executive Committee and the brief of the President to the NRM Parliamentary Caucus. This is the mandate of the NRM Party Secretariat, and they have a press conference tomorrow on the subject. So kindly accept us not to preempt. Let us deal with what is falling within the mandate of the legislative organ of the party, which is the NRM caucus, and the question for deployment. We did not specify when the motion should come, but I am going to extract this motion and write to both the Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs and the Attorney General of the Republic of Uganda, communicating the resolution of the legislative organ of the NRM party in Parliament. That is the caucus. So upon receipt, we expect nothing but for them to act as soon as possible in order for us to comply with Section 39 of the UPDF Act in totality. We were not briefed on who will fund the operation and the total cost, but the fact of the matter is the deployment, you must understand the spirit of the deployment in the spirit of brotherhood, in the spirit of solidarity, to also protect our national security as Uganda, but also in the interest of our economy. I think for now, we are looking at the underlying principle of the deployment. You seem to be armed with so much information. I may invite you to our military headquarters such that you can be able to share with them the information you have. For purposes of today's meeting, the main subject matter, the main focus was on the UPDF deployment to the Republic of South Sudan, which I have explained. If there is any other deployment that was done priorly, I would urge you either to look for the appropriate authority, because ours is to ask the question, was there deployment? The question is yes. Was it made under the law? Yes. The answer is yes. What else is required? The approval of Parliament for peace enforcement under Section 39. And that is exactly what we were dealing with in the meeting. Issues of minerals, where I should invite you to Mboya, or I will inform the leadership of the army to invite you such that you provide more information to them.
Hey, want to know
What we must ask ourselves, does Muhoozi and Museveni, as the CDF and the commander, have the ability, they have that immunity, that they must use our army, Ugandan army, UPDF, the way they want. The way the guy is explaining this thing, that if we're going for a peace mission, we're going to provide peace. Yeah, John Museveni must just have to do it the way he wants. But who pays? The Ugandan taxpayers' money will be used to pay our soldiers in South Sudan, or South Sudan payers' money, taxpayers' money will be used to pay our soldiers in South Sudan. Who is catering for these men and women in uniform in South Sudan? Ugandans or South Sudanians are the ones taking care of our army. There are questions we must know, because there are questions that need answer, and those answers must be given to the public, because it's my money, your money, that's being wasted outside your country, outside things that are not providing any value to your country. But because somebody fear that one might stage from South Sudan, come and attack me and take me and overthrow my government, so he has to go there and fight, so that somebody who believes in him, somebody who fears him, stay in that power, so that protects him from harboring people who will overthrow his government. But on the expense of you and me, the taxpayers. Let's wait and see what will be the outcome of UPDF in South Sudan.